Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. A tale to tell. Is anyone sitting here? Harriet looked up at the older woman standing at the other end of the bench. No, not that I can see, she responded, thinking to herself, does it look like anyone sitting there? Her day had been hectic, and she desperately wanted to get home. The woman sat down, fussing her fur coat around her and shifting her ample bosom into place. I hear the train to Fauchester is delayed. How bothersome. Yes, it is. I'm not sure what's happening. Harriet glanced at the woman and then resumed her gaze on the departure board as destinations and times flicked updates, all except for the Fauchester line, which still said, departing at 14:10. It was now 20 past 3. I don't know what's happened to our railways. The older woman lifted her chin and adjusted her green cloche hat. It never used to be like this. At least someone would let you know what was going on. I just wish it would hurry up. Harriet glanced at her watch, as if doing so might cause something to happen. It really has disrupted my day. I should have been at a very important appointment in Fauchester with my accountant, you understand. These things are very important. It doesn't do to keep people waiting like this. Really, it doesn't. Harriet glanced at the woman. She was much older than her, in her mid-60s at least. And to Harriet, the talk of accountants, her fur coat, patent leather clasp handbag, and matching shoes left her feeling rather insignificant. I just need to get home. There's so much I need to do. And I've left Freddie with... She paused. Suddenly, her circumstances seemed so trivial in comparison with the rather affluent-looking women she was sharing the bench with. Freddie? You've left him. What have you left him with? If you don't mind me inquiring, of course. We seem to be stuck here, so we might as well have a chat to while away the time. Well, you see, Freddie, he works for me at the office. Oh, I see. And you've had to leave him in charge, have you? What sort of office, if you don't mind me asking? The insurance brokers. You might know it. Harland and Tapsfield on Fountain Street. That much was true. Harriet worked as a part-time typist for the company, juggling her hours there with managing the small terraced house, her young son, and Freddie, her husband, who worked night shifts at the steel works. Oh yes, I think I do. Just near the provincial bank. Yes, I know the place. That's right. I'm a manager there. Harriet craned her head to look down the platform, hoping a guard or someone might be able to tell her when the train would be coming. But apart from other waiting people and the odd pigeon, there was no one who could cast any light on the situation. I really wish they'd let us know what's going on, she sighed. Insurance. I never could stand our insurance man. Silly little man with a pork pie hat and a mustache that always had bits of his lunch stuck in it. My husband dealt with all that, of course. Wilfred. Bless his soul. You do seem very young to be in charge at an insurance broker's. Oh, well, I might only be 25, but I'm very good at what I do. I certainly wouldn't have my people going around with lunch stuck in their mustaches. Harriet gave a small smile. I'm Harriet, by the way. Harriet West. Well, I'm pleased to meet you, Harriet West. I'm Dora Barton. You might have heard of me, or perhaps not. You may be of use to me someday if I'm needing to set up any insurance. Not that I should need to mind. My accountant sorts out that kind of thing for me. That must be nice, having someone to look after your affairs like that. It can be quite tiring, my dear, making sure they're doing the right thing. But I expect you know what that's like. Running an insurance, brokers must be dreadfully hard work, especially for a woman. And so young, too. Dora Barton looked Harriet up and down with a steely eye, taking in her slightly scuffed court shoes and raincoat that had seen better days. Her gaze left Harriet feeling rather uncomfortable, and she shuffled in her seat, reaching into her handbag. Actually, I really must make a phone call. Make sure that Freddie, at the office, I just need to speak to him. There's a telephone booth just at the end of the platform. I'll just go and see if I can reach him. Yes? Of course, dear. I can see you must be quite anxious. I'll make sure no one takes your seat while you're gone. And Dora spread herself a little more across the seat and placed her handbag at her side. Harriet strode quickly down the platform and into the small telephone booth where she dialed the number for home. Come on, Freddie, pick up. I've only got a couple of coins, she muttered. A clunk was heard at the end of the line, and Harriet quickly pushed her coins into the well-worn slot. Freddie, is that you? Well, of course it is. Who do you think it would be? Harry? What's up? Shouldn't you be back home by now? You know I like a couple of pints before my shift starts. Yes, it's me. The train is delayed. I don't know when it's going to arrive. Could you look after Michael until I get back? Well, I don't know, love. I thought you'd be back by now. Those trousers of mine still need mending, you know. Oh, well, Mrs. Bentley next door will have him, I'm sure, if you really have to go. I'll sort out your trousers when I get back. You know I will. You should be back by now, Harry. This isn't like you. I know. It's the train. Oh, Freddie, please just beep, beep, beep. The pips went at the end of the line, and Harriet placed the receiver back its cradle with a heavy thunk. Hoping desperately that Mrs. Bentley would be home, she trailed back to the bench where she could see Dora Barton talking to a man in a guard's uniform. So I said back then that the service wasn't acceptable, but it doesn't seem they've taken any notice. I'm sorry, madam. Like I said, there's a fallen tree across the line, and it's taking the fellas a while to shift it. A big one it is. Great big oak tree. Must have been the storms we had last week that weakened it or something. Came all the way down the banking, it did. The guard paused and looked at Harriet. Hello, miss. I was just telling your companion here about the tree that's blocking the Fauchester line. A tree? Oh no. How long is it going to take to clear? They don't know, interrupted Dora. They don't seem to be able to get their act together. I don't think I'm going to be able to keep my appointment now. It's going to be far too late. I'll let you ladies know if I hear anything else. The guard gave a brief smile and headed towards a group of frustrated-looking people further down the platform. Did you get everything sorted out at the office? Asked Dora, budging back down the bench as Harriet sat down. The office? Oh, yes, that. Yes. Freddie is fine. He's got everything in hand. At least I hope he has. Harriet's voice trailed off. Oh, you don't sound too sure. Freddie's okay. Really, he is. I can trust him. Just sometimes I need to check he's got everything under control. The two women sat quietly for a moment. The departure board continued to flick and update the details of all the trains except for theirs. Then, the bing-bong-bing of the tannoy. The 1410 Fauchester train is delayed. We know that, muttered Dora. And work is currently taking place to remove the obstructing tree from the line. We now expect the next train departing from this station to Fauchester to be at 17:30 hours. That's another hour and a half, wailed Harriet as she looked at her watch. It's really not good enough, tutted Dora. Honestly, what a way to spend a Tuesday afternoon. You know, in some respects, I think Tuesdays are far worse than Mondays. You know where you are with a Monday. You've got the whole week ahead of you, and you just get on with it. But Tuesday, it's as though you've managed to get Monday out of the way. But Friday still seems such a long way away. I suppose you won't make your accountant's appointment now? Harriet looked at the older woman, who was taking a lipstick from her bag and reapplying the red hue to her mouth. You're right. There's no sense in me waiting for a train now. How about I buy you a cup of tea in the cafe over there, as a thank you for keeping me company, and then I'll be on my way. Well, if you're sure, that would be nice. Better than sitting here for another hour. It's getting a bit chilly too, don't you think? The two ladies made their way across the station concourse to a small, bustling cafe, full with other people waiting for the delayed train. There's a table in the corner there, said Harriet. I'll grab it if you can get the tea. Yes? That's fine, dear. I'll do that. Harriet settled herself at the corner table, noting the various people who were filling the small cafe. Businessmen, people with shopping bags, women with small children, fractious at the delay. She thought of Michael and prayed that Freddie would find Mrs. Bentley at home. Her eyes shifted to the counter, where she could see Dora Barton fumbling in her bag. "Well, I'm quite sure it was here," she was saying to the surly-looking woman behind the counter. Dora looked over at Harriet and raised her shoulders in confusion. Not wanting to make a scene, Harriet shuffled her way between the busy tables towards Dora. "This lady here's got no money to pay for the tea," said the woman behind the counter, not seeming to care who could hear. And a few heads turned to see what the commotion was all about. "I do have money, I do," protested Dora. "But it's not here," she continued, looking in her bag, which, from where Harriet stood, appeared to contain only handkerchiefs and lipsticks. "Maybe you do," said the woman behind the counter, "but these teas won't pay for themselves." She looked at Harriet. "Have you got any money to pay with?" "Well, I think so." Harriet knew she only had a £1 note in her purse that she needed for the week's groceries. Dora and the woman behind the counter both looked at her, and with a small sigh, Harriet took the note from her purse and handed it to the woman. "That'll be 1.04 shillings," said the woman, as she took change from the till and handed it to Harriet. "Enjoy your tea." Back at the table, Dora lowered her voice. "My purse must have been stolen. I had it earlier. I'm so very embarrassed. Goodness knows what that woman must have thought." "I'm sure it will turn up," said Harriet, anxiously glancing out of the window to see if anything was happening that might indicate a train would be here soon. "Perhaps you left it at home." "Home? Well, perhaps I did that. But I must thank you for paying, though I'm sure, with your job, you won't mind spending a few pennies on a cup of tea. It's so terribly humiliating to be found with no money. What must you think of me?" Dora paused for a moment, and then her demeanor changed, the earlier air of confidence almost evaporating before Harriet's eyes. "You see, they said it would always be okay. But when Wilfred died, Wilfred was my husband. Understand? Well, what can I say? He left me in rather a pickle, I'm afraid." "Oh, I'm sorry." Harriet sensed the change in the woman and softened her tone. "What happened to your husband?" "I really don't remember. It was so long ago. I was playing Titania in A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Palace Theater at the time. Everything is such a blur. I'm sure I remember the funeral. The lovely man who played Puck was there. He said something. I can just remember. If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended. Yes, that's right. All is mended." "Dora, are you okay?" Harriet reached across the table and tentatively touched the older lady's arm. Immediately, Dora pulled her arm back in haste, as though something had bitten her. "Don't touch me. No, don't do that." Harriet retracted her hand quickly, reaching for her teacup to steady herself. She looked at Dora over its rim. I hope you'll be all right, Dora. But I think I'll go and see what's happening with the train just now. Yes, you do that. They might have the Pullman carriage ready for me now. See if you can hurry them along, dear. Dora opened her handbag and feverishly reapplied her lipstick again. But I thought Harriet was distracted by a scene playing out on the concourse outside the cafe. A woman in a long brown mackintosh and a man in a white coat were standing talking to the guard. The woman was gesturing with her arms, pointing down the platform and then back towards the street. The man in the white coat stood quietly, and the guard looked up and down, scratching his head underneath his cap. His eyes traced across the station, and then did a double take and stopped at the cafe. He looked at Harriet, who was just getting out of her seat, and pointed in her direction. The woman ran across the station, the man in the white coat following her as she burst into the cafe. "Mother!" she called across the small table-filled room. The voices in the cafe fell to a hush, and everyone looked at the woman, and then in Harriet and Dora's direction. "Don't let them take me." Dora grabbed Harriet's arm. "Please." The woman pushed her way between the tables, and now stood trembling as she looked down at Dora, who had her hands over her head and was trying to push herself as far as possible into the corner. "Mother, please, we've been worried sick. Where have you been? Leave me alone. This lady here is looking after me. See, she bought me tea, and she runs an insurance broker's, so she is quite capable. I don't need you or your doctor friend over there." The woman in the brown mackintosh looked at Harriet, eyebrows raised and questions etched across her face. "The train was delayed, and your mother sat next to me. She's missed her appointment with the accountant in Fochester, I'm afraid," Harriet said, attempting to explain the situation. "Accountant? Fochester? Oh, what has she been saying?" The woman looked in despair at the man in the white coat, who was now standing behind her. "I think I should go." Harriet picked up her handbag. "I really need to make sure I get on the train. Freddie is going to go crazy, and poor Michael will wonder where I am." "You tell Freddie to do as you say," piped up Dora from the corner. "You're the boss. Don't have him telling you what to do." "I think we should get Mrs. Barton back to my surgery," said the man in the white coat calmly. "We can get her settled down there. Come on now, Mother." The woman touched Dora's shoulder. Dora shirked away. "Let's get you back to talk to nice Mr. Davidson here, and no running off this time." She looked at Harriet. "Would you believe it? We only left her for less than a minute. We've been looking for her for the last 2 hours. Well, I'm glad you found her." Harriet moved to the other side of the woman. "Goodbye, Dora. It was nice to meet you." Dora looked up from the corner, dabbing her handkerchief at her mouth. "You tell that Freddie of yours," she said. "You tell him to mend his own trousers and to look after that little boy of yours properly." Harriet stared for a moment, unsure if she'd heard correctly, then hastened her goodbye and made her way towards the platform where the delayed 1410 to Fochester was pulling into the station. Later that evening, Harriet tucked Michael into his cot and placed a gentle good-night kiss on his forehead. She stood at the bedroom door and smiled, watching for a moment as her son fell into a blissful slumber. Downstairs, she took Freddie's torn trousers that he'd left strewn across the sofa and put them in a bag of scrap fabric that she kept in the cupboard under the stairs. She then made herself a cup of tea and settled down to read her favorite magazine. As Harriet West turned the pages of her magazine, 20 miles away, behind a locked bedroom door, Dora Barton lay in her small single bed, staring up at the ceiling and beyond, and Dora Barton smiled, distorted. I left home 5 years ago. As soon as I crossed that stage, high school diploma in hand, bypassing my peers, swept up by a wave of crying mums and proud grandparents. I was done. The boot of my car held as much of my 18 years of life as I could stuff into 3 boxes and 1 suitcase. I'd armed myself with a bank account full of every tip and paycheck I'd received from my waitressing job and an early acceptance offer from a university 2 states away, as far as I could get from a place I'd once called home. The night before, as my parents sat in some fancy restaurant for a reservation with friends they'd forgotten to tell me about, undoubtedly arguing with each other behind plastic smiles, I packed away my clothes and books and bed sheets in neat little rows until my room was almost barren. Apart from the old wooden furniture, my bedroom was cleaner than it had probably ever been, and I laughed at thinking about how, if the situation was different, it might finally make my mother happy with me. At 10:07 p.m., they arrived home, my father slamming the door as their whisper shouting floated upstairs. I knew they weren't being considerate of the fact that I might be sleeping, but rather they worried about the possibility that a commotion might alert the neighbors, that they would see through the cracks in the foundations of their picture-perfect dream house. They didn't come in to say goodnight. Hadn't since I was 8, and old enough to read myself to sleep. As I pulled out of the parking lot and left my formative school years in the back windshield, I thought about what my parents would tell their friends, the neighbors, the busybodies in the grocery store checkout line. Would they lie and tell everyone I had accepted a scholarship for some prestigious university overseas? Or maybe I'd traveled to Africa to work in humanitarian aid, something they could brag about and say, "She's made us so proud." Possibly, they'd invent a job with NASA or an internship at Google. They hardly knew enough about me to know what I'd actually be studying or what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was sure they wouldn't be bold enough to tell the truth, that their daughter had disappeared without warning while they spent their day in board meetings and having sex with their personal assistants in hotel rooms paid for by their companies. There would be no missing persons report or flyers offering an egregious sum of money in reward for my safe return home. Nothing that would cast a shadow on their spotless reputations. I would fade further into the background of their lives, as if a figment of their imagination, only resurrected when one of their friends spotted me in one of the professionally shot family photos, stilted and artificial, and asked after me. That's if they kept the frames up at all. My parents would have to dig up my coffin from the deepest parts of their memory, plaster a smile on their face, and grit their teeth. They would spin some vague anecdote about speaking to me on the telephone last Tuesday and how well I was doing, and maybe they'd go visit me at Christmas. They'd have forgotten all about me by the time they brought out the first course. I mean, they hardly remembered I existed, even while we lived under the same roof. That's why I was so shocked when they called me one Sunday, 5 years after I left town and never looked back, and asked me to come for a visit soon. I had no idea how they knew my number. I'd changed it after moving and never given them the new one. That's why I didn't respond for almost a minute after hearing my father's voice through the tiny speaker. I almost convinced myself I was dreaming or having a stroke. Maybe I'd temporarily slipped into an alternate reality where it was normal for my father to have my number, to call me out of the blue and invite me over. Anything to explain why the fuck he was calling. There was no special occasion. Nobody was sick and dying, and there was no upcoming birthday to celebrate. They just wanted to see how I was doing and make amends. They missed me, they said, through the crackling of the landline. I wondered if they had finally snapped and gone crazy, if they'd learned a sense of humor and this was some kind of prank. Or perhaps they had early onset dementia and had forgotten that I had never been much more than a roommate they had complained about having to spend their hard-earned money on. I told them I would think about it and immediately hung up. I spent the next 2 days trying to forget about it altogether until I came home from work to a letter in my mailbox, a one-way ticket dated 2 weeks from then, set to arrive at the airport an hour out from the town I grew up in. On the front of the envelope, my address, written in my mother's sloping, elegant handwriting. Nausea settled in the pit of my belly. How did they know my address? I'd not kept in contact with a single person from my childhood. The hairs on the back of my neck tingled as the growing sense of being watched settled into my skin. Then a thought popped into my head. Had they known the whole time? Had they known where I was all these years and never bothered to reach out? Suddenly, I was 12 again, and realizing my parents were never going to care about me the way the kids at school were cared for. This confirmed what I had always known. I was alone in this world. It took some deliberating, But I decided I would go. I would see what it was they wanted from me, and if they really had changed. I told myself I wouldn't give in to whatever manipulation tactics they might pull. I would be strong and remain distant. And when it was done, I would demand that they never contact me again. Even still, my bones were heavy with paranoia the following weeks. I elected to hire a rental car to drive from the airport to their house. There was no way I'd give my parents the satisfaction of driving me, of having any modicum of control over me once more. And this way, if I needed to leave, I wouldn't be forced to wait 20 minutes for a taxi. I parked on the street. The house had been repainted a soft eggshell color instead of the previous gray and rows of gardenias lined the fence where there had once been neat box hedges. I breathed deeply through my nose before raising my hand to knock. My mother pulled the door open as my fist made contact with the wood, causing me to stumble back. She must have been watching me from the window. Waiting, she was smiling. That was strange in its own right, but it was weirder because I knew it wasn't my mother's smile. Her smile never reached her eyes. She would never do anything that would cause lines to form on her face. Her smile always gave you the sense that she was laughing at you rather than with you, pitying you. My mother did not smile, but when she did, it was always forced. This was a genuine smile. It was happy. I felt immediately that something was deeply wrong. A shiver ran through my spine. There was something wrong about her face. It was fuzzy around the edges, as if she was wearing a mask. I rubbed at my eyes with closed fists, trying to clear my vision. But the effect remained. I figured I was tired from my flight, but the closer I inspected her, the clearer it became that something was off. It looked as if someone had tried to draw her face as accurately as possible. After taking a long glance at a picture of it, my mother reached towards me with outstretched arms and drew me into an embrace. I stood stiffly, with my arms by my side, trying and failing to remember when she had last hugged me. Surely at some point in my childhood. Definitely not after the age of 10. She invited me inside. This house was nothing like the one I'd left. Cold and sparse, decorated as if a model home. It was warm and filled with color and light. I wondered if somehow my memories of my horrible, lonely childhood had managed to warp my recollection of the house itself. But I knew that wasn't right. This new hallway was illuminated by a warm glow, and funky paintings hung from the walls. The dining table was set with a red gingham tablecloth that my mother would have called tacky, and a vase of sunflowers. In the kitchen, my father took a large tray out of the oven before pausing to take a long pull from the neck of a beer bottle. I had never seen my father drink beer before. He used to say it was the common man's drink, and that real men drank whiskey. He turned to say hello, and where his face had once been clean-shaven and professional, stubble grew freely. Like my mother, something was off. And it wasn't just the facial hair. His nose was smaller than I remembered. Eyes just a fraction too far apart. From afar, or at a passing glance, it was the man I'd grown up with. But as he stepped closer to greet me, his features shifted. It was like looking at an optical illusion. And when I changed my gaze, the true image would slip into place. They watched me. To anyone else, it might seem they were worried, for I hadn't said a word since my mother opened the door. But I could see it in their eyes, the suspicion. They were wondering if I'd noticed, waiting for me to say something. I stuttered out empty platitudes about being happy to see them, and they shuffled me over to sit at the table. Dinner was pistachio-encrusted chicken breast served with a peach and goat cheese salad. When my father announced the menu, I stopped short, fork raised halfway to my mouth. My mother was allergic to pistachios. This was a fact she despised, as she perceived any sort of weakness to be a flaw, and my mother was not flawed. I said as much, but my mother just stared at me with an odd look and told me she didn't have any allergies. She never had. And then she went on eating, cutting her chicken into bite-sized cubes and placing them delicately on her tongue, never breaking out in hives or becoming short of breath as her throat closed up. I was beginning to feel as if I was going out of my mind. I managed to stumble my way through conversation, letting my parents do the brunt of the work, barely processing a word they said. I excused myself to my room, citing exhaustion and an early night. My father followed with my bag, and as I reached the top of the stairs and turned right towards my old bedroom, he laughed at me. It wasn't the same boisterous laugh he'd had at dinner when discussing his golfing buddies. It was sharp and croaky, like it didn't belong to him. I hadn't seen my father laugh enough as a child to know which one was more his own. My bedroom was to the left, he said, with a curious look on his face. Don't you remember? And he pushed past me, guiding me down the corridor to a room I knew was not mine. I followed him slowly. Inside the doorway, he dropped my bag, calling good night over his shoulder as he moved back downstairs. I locked the door. The furniture was the same, but there were pictures on the wall I had no recollection of. Myself and my parents at the beach and in the snow and with my grandparents. These were not my pictures. My mother hated the sand, and the first time I'd been to the beach was with some uni friends a year after I left home. I had never met my grandparents, let alone taken photographs with them. They had both died before I was born. I sat down on the bed. It was made tidily, with the same striped sheets I had packed in a box all those years ago. I sat there for hours, listening as my parents cleaned and made their way to bed. When I was sure they were sleeping, I slipped out the door and into the rental car. As I drove to the airport, heart racing against my rib cage, I knew one thing for sure. I was certain that those people were not my parents. On loop. Maverick Kotzen, 12/27/24. On loop. It was less than an hour after my surgery that I realized I would never be able to forgive my surgeon. Merely a week prior, I had walked into my surgeon's office to go over the final details leading up to the procedure, what to eat and drink beforehand, what to not do, and a reiteration of the risks in order to confirm that I really wanted the procedure. Ever since I had fallen off a rock swing and slammed my elbow into a rock, my right arm hadn't been able to move or even bend, leading me to be effectively half as useful as I used to be. The choice to get a full reconstruction of my elbow was not an easy one. The way it had broken, there were far less invasive and safer procedures that were available to me. I was hesitant, but my surgeon took my hand, assured me that it was the best course of action, and said, "It's going to be okay." 3 days before the procedure, my anxiety had only worsened, and my partner had done the best they could to comfort me. They told me that the risks were still low, and that this procedure would return to me the full mobility I had before my life was turned upside down. Friends had reached out, comforting me and wishing me a speedy recovery, as if I had already gone through with the operation. It felt as if I had already been altered, physically and personally, by the procedure, despite not even having the surgery yet. Even my dog knew something was off, as he wagged his tail and snuggled up next to me every night in my bed, instead of sleeping in his dog bed like he always does. It felt like the natural rhythm of my life had been disrupted, and that nothing would ever feel the same way it did. I began to fantasize and romanticize my life before the accident, as if it had been the peak of existence. This, of course, glosses over the struggles I was having earlier that year to pay rent, repair my relationship with my parents, and help a friend through an accidental pregnancy. Through the storm of thoughts, I clutched desperately to the mast of the boat, repeating as the next big wave came to hit me, "It's going to be okay." 2 days before the procedure, the anxiety had not improved, and it was visible on my partner's face that they were clearly worried about me. My despondency when I was asked questions, my inattentiveness when attempting tasks with one arm, and even my lack of appetite were just a few of the worrying symptoms that were beginning to present themselves en masse. Behind my back, my partner was contacting my friends, trying to coordinate some kind of effort to boost my mood, all while I more or less lay in my bed all day, watching daytime television and periodically getting up to use the restroom. In between naps and TV fever dreams, I had flashbacks to all of the warnings from friends and family about the procedure. Are you sure you want to do this? What if you never fully recover? I don't know about this operation. Isn't there a considerable chance they screw up and just have to amputate your arm? I fully support you and your decision, but I want to make sure you've thought it through. These criticisms, at the time, seriously made me reconsider my decision. Ultimately, I decided to stay the course, but the decision to go against the better advice of my friends felt wrong even at the time. The weird and odd feeling of regret that washed over me every time I reassured them and told them I was going through with it only amplified the more people I talked to. Whenever I talked to anyone who knew me, the surgery would sooner or later come up, and I would have to wait during conversation until that dreaded moment came. My friends were with me, surgery or no, but the storm upon which my boat had been sailing only seemed to intensify, as big wave after big wave nearly broke my ship in two. Still clutching onto that mast of hope as thoughts flowed freely in and out of my mind as I lay awake at midnight. It's going to be okay. 24 hours out from the procedure, my anxiety had completely paralyzed me. Even the most basic tasks, like brushing my teeth or going to the bathroom, felt like Herculean tasks that required tremendous effort. I turned off my phone at that point in order to calm my nerves, and had even sworn off television for the day. I just sat in my bed and read some of my favorite books, periodically taking breaks to stare out of the window. The surgery loomed like a dark cloud above my head, ready to rain over my head at any given moment and take full control of my consciousness. It dawned on me at that moment that this procedure, the one I had defended from friends and fought so hard to have, had largely come to define me as a person. At the very least, I had let it define me in many ways. Reflecting on my thoughts at the time, I am now able to see how completely enveloped I had been. Irony, though cruel. For it seemed that despite the fact that my elbow was about to be repaired, a part of me had been damaged in the process. Sure, I was to be fixed physically, but mentally, my anxiety and nervousness had never been higher. As I went to bed that night, the last thought I can remember is a gentle acceptance as the day of the surgery fast approached, and a comforting line, "It's going to be okay." On the morning of the surgery, my surgery, I was woken by my partner early in the morning. They gave me my water bottle, my clothes, and opened the door for me to get into the passenger seat of our car at a bright and sunny 4 a.m. By the time I got to the hospital, all events began to blend together. The reception, the being shown to the bed, and the surgeon's explanation of the preoperative all seemed like a free-flowing dream. The last memory I have right before going under anesthesia is of my partner holding my hand, whispering in a soft, reassuring tone, "It's going to be okay," as I would soon find out. It was not going to be okay. Based on the beginning of my story, you can guess how well my procedure went. 3 hours into the reconstruction of my elbow, a complication caused internal bleeding all throughout my arm. With no ability to stop it, they ended up having to amputate my arm from the elbow down. Upon waking, I felt phantom pain almost immediately, and would continue to feel that way for days after. My surgeon came into the room shortly after I awoke and tried consoling me. There was nothing I could have done. These things just happen sometimes. I'm sorry. Did any of his words even matter? I had held his words dear for so long, and for them to ring hollow in my moment of utmost need was one of the most depressing situations I have ever been in. My partner, in between crying sessions, attempted to reassure me. I heard him begin to say, "Don't worry, no matter what, it's going to be..." Paranoia. It was a cold November evening. Rain was showering on the street, creating a constant background noise. People ran from cover to cover, and residents of the building gathered near the window, admiring the incredible scenery outside. Except for Carl. Carl spent what seemed like an eternity examining his mug. His favorite mug, the mug he had for several years. Yet there was something strange with it. Using something for a long time, you remember small things about it. Little cracks, stains, tiny pieces of something edible that was stuck near the handle. It was there, but something was wrong. Just like if someone bought a brand new mug and, "Hey, Carl, are you all right?" Jesus Christ. Carl got frightened and turned around, convulsively trying to control his hands and not to break anything. The mysterious voice belonged to his friend, Conrad, who stood in his kitchen with an anxious expression and a bottle of wine. Yes, I'm all right. It's just... Wait, how did you get into my apartment? You gave me the spare keys, remember? Conrad put the bottle on a table and proceeded with the conversation. Are you sure you are all right? You look really concerned about something. I mean, people in your profession always look concerned, but today, it's a bit too much. What's going on? Yeah, no, it's nothing serious. Carl got 2 wine glasses in the kitchen and proceeded to sit at the table while trying to express his concerns. It's just my mug. It doesn't look right. Your mug? Conrad was visibly surprised. The one you have from college? The only thing that's not right about it is that I remember you holding your mug more than holding your ex-wife. I mean, That's why we got divorced, Carl laughed. Not because of the mug, obviously, but you get the point. Carl realized he had forgotten about a wine opener and went to the kitchen to get it, while continuing his speech. The point is, it's not like it should be. It's hard to explain. Something is not right. Maybe it's a little cleaner than usual, but something else is off too. That happens to mugs when they get cleaned, Conrad said, trying to play it as a joke, but looking really concerned. Are you saying what I think you are saying? The room was silent for a moment. Carl was deep into his thoughts and unsure if he wanted to discuss it. But there is no better person to share his fears than Conrad. I mean, Carl began hesitantly. You know the country we live in, with all the secret police and repressions and all this stuff. What if they are spying on me? You are right about a country we live in. Conrad ate an olive and continued. And you know much better than I do about all the people that fell into paranoia and lost themselves in madness. No one was watching them. And no one is watching you, Carl. You just forgot that you washed the mug. Don't do this to yourself. Yeah, I guess you are right. I'm seriously, Carl. Don't do this to yourself. This country already lost too many good men to paranoia. We cannot lose you too. You are right. And I really mean it. Carl and Conrad smiled at each other and started the dinner. While you age, you tend to lose your friends. Not because something is wrong with you or with them, at least mostly, but because life drives you apart. You begin to work. They begin to work. You start a family. They start a family. Suddenly, you don't see each other anymore. You hardly know what is happening in each other's lives. And all your conversations are mostly wishing each other a Merry Christmas. That was not the case for Carl and Conrad. They were there for each other for as long as they can remember. They finished school together, lived together through college, and helped each other in all ways possible. Conrad was there when Carl got married and divorced. Even when they started to drift apart, they made a deal to gather every 2 weeks to drink some wine and catch up on what was going on in their lives. Carl knew he could trust Conrad and didn't lie when he said he would abandon all that spy paranoia. At least, he thought that. Soon after Conrad left, Carl poured himself some tea in the mug, the one that almost drove him crazy, went to his cabinet, and opened some documents he was working on. He opened a file, took a sip of tea, and wanted to start the work, but he still hesitated. He could not stop staring at the mug. Obviously, Conrad was right. The mug was the same as always. But Carl could not stop thinking that someone bought a new mug and tried to recreate the original one with cracks and stains. Was it paranoia? Certainly. But Carl knew one thing. He must do something to find out, or his mind will never be at peace again. That night, Carl put away his documents, finished the tea, and went to sleep. The following day, he bought a camera and hid it in the cabinet. If someone was there spying on him, they would return to the apartment. Days passed, and Carl sat in his cabinet each evening and watched videotapes from his camera. Nothing. Day after day, week after week. He did not tell Conrad anything about it, so as to not disappoint his friend. He knew that it was not healthy to do something like that to yourself, but he couldn't stop. He promised to monitor it for a month or a month and a half, and then stop. It was almost the deadline, if not counting the ones Carl already moved to later. He understood that he slowly lost control over his paranoia, and knew that it must come to an end. One more time. That's it. Carl committed to watching the very last tape from this camera, and there was nothing. Again. But something was off. Carl replayed the tape again and noticed what was bothering him. The timestamp skipped 3 seconds once. It may have been just a manufacturer error or problems with the power supply, but Carl still wanted to check for something. If he was right, someone might have erased part of the tape. In that case, they knew where the camera was because they saw how Carl hid it. He took his flashlight and tested it against his camera. Light reflected on the lenses and created small flares. If he was being watched, his apartment must contain other cameras. Carl knew that he was too deep into his paranoia, but could not resist himself. After all, if he found out he was right, that's not paranoia. He started flashing his apartment, inch by inch. He couldn't find anything until he saw a flare in a bookshelf. He put his hands on the shelf and tried to find what caused this flare. His hands touched something, and his heart skipped a beat. There was another camera. He rushed to his desk to watch the tape on a newly found camera. His hands shook, and his mind could not focus on a single thought. He finally had proof that he was right all the time. Nevertheless, it took him much courage to activate the camera. He would have to live with whatever was there for the rest of his life. But he knew that there was no other choice. The tape was on. Carl first noticed a person changing the SD card on a camera. It seemed like a regular procedure, and Carl could not wait to see who this man was. A second later, the villain revealed his face. It was Conrad. Carl could not believe what he saw. Conrad, his best friend, was a secret police officer, and he was spying on Carl. The tape went on as Conrad took Carl's camera and started editing it. This is why there was nothing on the camera before, but it took just one mistake for everything to be revealed. Then Conrad found the documents Carl was working on, took some notes in his textbook, put everything in its place, and left. Carl was shaking. He could not breathe normally and started crying. Conrad. Out of everyone, Conrad, his best friend, the only person he could trust. All these years, everything they went through, all the time they helped each other live through the worst moments of their lives, were now void. Nothing. Just a lie. Carl was heartbroken. He didn't know what to do, and wasn't even sure if he wanted to live anymore. He felt like all his life had been a giant lie. No, it's not how it should end. One thing that jerk was right about is that this country could not lose Carl, too. It was hard and tough, but he had to do something right now. First, Carl scouted the house to find more cameras. There was one in the bedroom and one in the living room. Now, it's time for action. Two can play this game, and Conrad just lost a huge advantage. Now Carl knows he is being watched. First, Carl edited the footage from the found cameras. Now he knew exactly where they were and how to hide what should not be found. He didn't want to look too suspicious, though. Sometimes he left some clues, usually useless, so that he would not be detected. As for Conrad, Carl made sure he did not suspect anything. As hard as it was, the two continued their tradition of gathering every 2 weeks. Carl had to put all his willpower to use to not punch his friend in the face. Sometimes he skipped the wine party for made-up reasons, but always edited the videotapes accordingly. One evening, when they sat at the table, Carl said the one thing he had planned for a long time. "Hey, Conrad, I want to show you something I was working on. Just promise to keep the secret, all right? It might cause big problems if anybody knows, except for us." Toxic Confections. Beep, beep. Catherine put on her oven mitts and pulled out the hot tray of chocolate chip cookies from the oven. She turned the oven off before the timer could beep again. Working quickly, she lifted the cookies off the sheet and onto a cooling rack. She cleaned as she went, making sure not to leave any crumbs on the counter or any dirty dishes out. Brendan would be coming home shortly, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She had gone out earlier to buy a large brown rug for the living room and situated it underneath the coffee table. She had seen rugs used in the movies. She was careful to use cash, as she didn't want the purchase on her credit card. Catherine hoped he wouldn't notice the new rug right away, but if he did, she'd just tell him she wanted to spruce the place up a bit, which she rarely ever got to do. Their home was always so clean and welcoming, though. Nothing was ever out of place. Brendan's friends loved coming over here for football Sundays. She would shower them with snacks, beer, and witty commentary as she portrayed herself as the perfect housewife. She checked the clock. 3:44 p.m. He would be getting home in less than half an hour. Her breathing quickened, and her heart starting beating hard against her chest. She'd been meticulously planning this for weeks, and now it was only 20 minutes away from happening. If this doesn't work, I'm dead. This needs to work. She had gone to the library and read through too many books to get this wrong. Everything, down to the measurements she needed. And the phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Hello? Catherine slowly picked up the phone on the edge of the counter. She wasn't allowed to have a cell phone, so the only other option was a landline, which sucked because it had no caller ID, so she often had to deal with telemarketers. Hey, Kat, how are you? The familiar voice on the other end asked. Her sister was one of the only people in her life that still talked to her. Catherine had slowly pushed everyone else away over the last few years, becoming quite isolated. Hi, Becca. I'm good. How are you? How's Brian? The kids? She asked, trying to sound normal and hoping the answers would be quick so that she could get back to preparing for tonight. We're all great. I hope we can get together soon. It feels like I haven't seen you in ages. We need to go for dinner or drinks soon, Becca exclaimed. She always sounds so bubbly and happy. I wish I could be like that, Catherine thought to herself. Maybe one day soon. Yes, I'd love to. Sorry, I've been so busy lately with work. I just haven't gotten around to seeing anyone. We will hang out soon, though. I promise. This was a lie. Catherine hadn't worked in 3 years, but she'd been lying for so long about it that changing her story now felt impossible. The truth was, she couldn't let her sister see the bruises and cuts that marked her body, the ones that showed up too often and were sometimes too hard to hide. A week ago, one of Catherine's old classmates from college had recognized her when she was at dinner with Brendan. A tall, attractive man she had known only because they had done a couple of group projects together in English class. She did her best to end the conversation quickly, feigning disinterest, but the damage was already done. The drive home that night was silent. But as soon as they got through the front door, Brendan screamed at her, accused her of cheating with this man, whose name she couldn't even remember. You are such a whore. You open your legs for every man out there, don't you? Am I not good enough for you? Is that it? You think you can do better than me? No, I barely even know him. In between sobs, Catherine had tried to reassure him that nothing was going on. I haven't spoken to him since college, and nothing ever happened between us. Bullshit! His fist hit her in the stomach first. When she keeled over in pain, he pushed her backwards into the wall. She fell onto the floor, and he continued kicking her in the legs, ribs, arms, anywhere but her face. He knew that wasn't so easily covered up like the rest. She put her arms up to protect herself, begging him to stop. and he eventually backed off, only to grab a glass from the cupboard and throw it at the wall just above her head. Before leaving the room, glass rained down, scraping her head and arms. A trickle of blood rolled down from her forehead into the corner of her eye, blurring her vision. This wasn't the worst he'd ever done to her, but it still cut deep. The physical pain stung, but the emotional agony was far worse. How could the person she loved treat her like this? She lay there on the floor for an hour before forcing herself upright and cleaning up the broken glass. Brendan was already asleep, so she showered, bandaged herself up, changed into pajamas, and got into bed beside him, all the while planning her escape. Brendan was used to her forgiving him every time he had one of these episodes. He was very good at manipulating the situation to make her feel like it was all her fault. He would buy her flowers, tell her he didn't mean to hurt her, but that it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't entertained him, been so careless, left such a huge mess for him, etc. She was always the one who ended up apologizing. Little did he know, she had wanted to leave him for months, but was terrified that he may actually kill her if she tried. She was also always a little hopeful that he would change, because she did still love him, as much as she tried not to. After the last 3 times, though, she no longer cared if he changed or not. She needed to get herself out of this permanently. "Kat, you there?" Becca's voice startled her back to the present. "Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Just distracted. Still have so much to do before Brendan gets home. I don't want him to see this mess. Plus, I have to make dinner and do the laundry still. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Yeah, of course." Becca paused. "You know, he could be helping you with some of that, too. You shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself." She had never liked Brendan, had tried to convince Catherine not to marry him because she got a bad vibe from him. Too bad Catherine hadn't listened. "I know. I'll talk to him. Love you. Bye. Love you too." Catherine hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Bending down, she reached under the sink, behind the garbage can, and pulled out the bottle of cyanide. Again, she poured a tablespoon of it into a teacup, then started boiling some water. She had decided on this method because she had read that it was clean, simple, and often used by housewives with horrible husbands. There would be no messy cleanup, and it was so easy to slip something into his food or drinks without being detected. One thing he did appreciate about her was her cooking skills. She knew her way around a kitchen, and he always ate everything she made. She had mixed in a good amount of cyanide into the cookies, hoping he would eat a lot of them. But just in case, she would also be putting some in his tea, which would be waiting for him on the coffee table when he got home. next to a plate of cookies. If he offered her some, she had planned on her excuse being that she had already eaten one, and that was enough. Brendan liked her skinny, and often commented on how much she ate, so he would understand. Just as she finished mixing the cream and sugar into his tea, she heard the sound of Brendan's tires crunching gravel on the driveway. She looked out the window to see him climbing out of his car. Catherine took one more quick look at everything she had prepared. I think this is it. This either works or it doesn't. He dies or he kills me. Either way, I'll be out of this hell. He came through the door, tossing his briefcase down on the ground. Honey, I'm home. Where's my kiss? Brendan called out. Catherine hurried over, reaching up to give him a quick peck before helping him with his coat. She felt a slight twinge of sorrow as she realized this would likely be their last kiss. But she pushed that thought out of her mind by reminding herself how he has treated her these last few years. He'd isolated her, insulted her, beat her, made her feel like she was worthless, and then made her think everything was her own fault. Fuck him. I made your favorite browned butter chocolate chip cookies. Come have a seat, she offered, putting on a big, fake smile as she hung his coat on the coat rack. Great. I'm starving. I had a rough day at work today, he said, taking a seat on the couch. She noticed he didn't say thank you, as though this kind of greeting was just expected of her and warranted no appreciation. She watched as he took a sip of the Earl Grey cyanide tea and then a bite of one of the cookies. These are delicious. They taste a little different than usual, Brendan said. Yeah, I tried something a little different today. Catherine smiled at him. It's good. Hey, is this a new rug? He finally noticed, taking in the brown, patterned, synthetic fiber rug below his feet. Catherine's heart jumped, but she remained calm. She had prepared for this. Yeah, I saw it today and thought it would look perfect in our living room. And later, you'll look perfect, all rolled up in it, she thought to herself, holding back a smirk. Well, I think a gray rug would have been better. We will have to pick out a nicer one this weekend. Nice effort, though. He finished one cookie and started on another, taking a sip of tea in between. So condescending. I can't wait till he shuts up for good. Okay, baby, she said, turning around and heading into the kitchen so he couldn't see her expression change to annoyance. Catherine pulled the water jug out of the fridge and poured herself a glass. Behind her, she heard Brendan cough and say, I'm not feeling too well. Did you do something to these? She turned around in time to watch him vomit on the new carpet and clutch his head. His head must be killing him by now. Headaches and vomiting are some of the first symptoms of cyanide poisoning. He laid his head back on the couch, dazed. I'll have to make sure he doesn't leave any vomit on the couch, too. I really don't feel good. Call an ambulance, he begged, quietly. His body began to shake with convulsions. Seizures were another symptom. Catherine stayed silent, watching as he slowly stopped seizing, and then breathing all together. She quietly took pride in freeing herself from such a monster. Someone who pretended to love her, only to hurt her more deeply than she'd ever been hurt, was truly monstrous in her eyes. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as she mourned the last 5 years of her life. No one should ever have to endure the kind of abuse she had. And now, he could never hurt her or anyone else ever again. Now, all that remained was to get rid of his body. A small smile tugged at her lip as she set to work. Bread, tea, life. A steaming loaf of bread. For the last year, Marco, a UX designer by profession and a baker by hobby, has been fighting forgetfulness. Not sure how it started. Maybe there was a medical reason. He'd lay in bed thinking a tumor was cooking in the corner of his brain, slowly degenerating his memory, closer to a stroke with each day. He didn't even know if brain tumors and strokes had to do anything with one another. He just knew both were bad and didn't want to know more. Or maybe it was all due to alcohol and cigarettes in his younger years. He used to drink and smoke heavily until the bad habits caught up with him at his friend's wedding 3 years ago. He woke up with a hangover, but it was a different type of hangover. His head felt like a malfunctioned computer that worked at 50% of its capabilities. His mind would turn on and off as he was waiting for breakfast. Then, after a 4th time going to breakfast to douse his face in cold water, his brain turned on entirely. He could almost feel the full power of consciousness kicking in. The probability that it might not happen next time scared him, or maybe it was due to that tick bite he got 2 years ago. 2 weeks later, it turned out he had Lyme disease. It was discovered early, and he drank antibiotics. But you never know. Or maybe, actually, most likely, it was because the sorry excuse for a human that was his wife was driving him crazy. Constantly nagging. Never was everything fine. Always something wrong. And it was him that needed fixing, never her. Or if she needed fixing, it was because of something he had done, even when what he was doing was good. For example, back when he didn't have a sustainable income, life was bad because she was carrying the financial weight. Then, when the tables turned, and he became the one bringing in the money, life was bad because she felt useless. Then, all the diseases. One day, it's breast cancer. Then it's leukemia, only to be suspicious of an unknown bone disease. Next, the mental issues, bipolarity, anxiety, panic attacks, depression. Marco had no problem with any of those. He was there to help. What ticked him off was the nerve to complain about his behavior when he had a bad week. It was understandable if she was in a rut, but God forgive if it was the other way around. Then he was a selfish and cold-blooded bastard. All of that was the reason for his panic attacks. Marco has never had them before as long as he could remember. Then he'd get sudden panic attacks while waiting for her to finish her shopping or while on a bus. It would happen out of the blue. He'd have a perfect day, then a sudden surge in the brain and panic. The result was panicking about a possible next panic attack. He couldn't remember if this was before or after his friend's wedding. It was a long time ago. Too many events to remember the exact time. Finally, the tea. The apartment was full of tea. Green tea, black tea, Earl Grey, matcha, chamomile, desert delight, 1001 nights, the Gauss flights. All these general and random names. And okay, it was fine. Nothing wrong with someone enjoying tea. But she'd buy one. God knows it would be outside her budget. Drink it once, and then leave it in the cupboard. Like a lunatic collector. But instead of LP records, it was tea. Anyways, Marco stopped for a second. What was he doing again? It was always like this. He'd be doing one thing, start thinking about her the next, get angry, and then forget about closing the fridge door. He looked at the still hot loaf of bread. He took the knife and cut into it. Steam was dancing from it and mixing with the kitchen. A perfect concoction of tasteless air and oven-fresh pleasantness. Then he looked at a small bottle next to it. Was he really going to poison her? What a crazy thought. He still couldn't believe how he managed to get his hands on the poison. The poison needed to have no flavor. He didn't want to jeopardize the bread, but could he do it? Now that the moment has arrived, could he kill? No. Could he kill another person? His wife, out of all people. He wasn't that type of person. The ones you read about in the news, they are always ugly, weird, and either too thin or too fat. He wasn't that. He liked people, and people liked him. Unlike the fat and the thin, he had a reason. She brought him to this point. He'd never do it for pleasure. His action was justifiable. He cut 2 pieces of bread and put them on a plate. He opened the fridge and took some ham and cheese. Next, he cut both ham, cheese, into fine finger food pieces and decorated them next to the bread. The fridge light helped him see better. He picked up the plate, took a deep breath, and walked towards the living room. He stopped. Wait. Did he put the poison in the dough before baking the bread? He remembered pondering whether to lace the bread before or after. It made sense to do it before. But what if the heat neutralized the poison? Unlikely, but it could happen. He should have used more than a few drops. What's the worst that could happen if he didn't? He chuckled. She'd die even more? Huh. Snap out of it, Marco. Did you put the poison or not? He grabbed the bottle and brought it to his eye level. He jigged the small brown bottle to see if there was less poison than before. No idea. He pulled the cork and smelled the poison. No smell. What was he expecting? Damn fridge. Always forget to close it. Marco slammed the fridge door. What to do? What to do? Maybe he should roll with it. And if it works, it works. If not, he'll try again. No. That means he'd have to hide the poison somewhere in the apartment until the opportunity arrives. He couldn't live with the stress, not with all the cleaning she does every single day. Bake another bread? But what if she arrives while he's baking the second bread, and the first bread is already on the table? How would he explain that? His gaze stopped at the tea cupboard. He grabbed the chamomile, mint, lavender, rosemary, and clove mix, turned on the stove to boil water. 250 milliliters exactly. He shoved a teaspoon into the mix and combined it with water. Then he waited for 5 minutes. The tea was ready. Just don't forget, collection day. The hovercraft roared over the tree line, hulking steel against a bruised gray sky. The rotors thrashed, a violent, mechanical pulse, as the collectors, clad in shiny black armor, spilled out onto the cracked earth. Collection Day, Commander Hu sang, his voice crackling through the comm system and echoing through the steel hull. Khufu stood fast and readied his weapon. The door opened with a hiss as early morning sunlight poured inside. "Unload!" Commander Hu called. Their boots thudded and pounded the floor, first steel and then earth, as the villagers beyond cowered behind huts and crates. The collectors burst forth from the hovercraft like terrible ants, busy and bustling. They moved with ruthless efficiency. One yanked a sack of withered potatoes from a woman's trembling hands. Another snatched a clay pot, its contents spilling onto the dust, staining it a muddy brown. Khufu watched, his stomach clenching. This was once his home. None of them knew that, of course. When you joined the collectors, any life you once had was washed away like soot in the rain. He'd been on more than a dozen of these runs, more than a dozen collection days, each of them vicious, but none like this. Then he saw her, Willow. She stood apart, her chin lifted in a gesture of defiance he remembered so well. Even after all this time, the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. It was Willow, unbent, unbeaten, untamed. Thunder crashed in the distance as a wave of memories crashed over him. It was a collection day, like this one, many years ago. The sun beat down on their bare backs as the two of them, scrawny saplings in a field of oaks, snuck through the tall grass. Mrs. Rosen had fallen ill, so they had hidden away a few armfuls of food and medicine, and were determined to find a place to hide before the hovercraft left. Willow had a knack for hiding. She was always the last caught in hide and seek. But on this day, something gave them away. Perhaps the swaying of the grass as they crawled through it. "Who's there?" A collector's shout, sharp as a blade, shattered the quiet. Fear, cold and slick, slid down Khufu's spine. He glanced at Willow, her eyes wide and dark. He pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," he breathed silently. Then he stood up, his arms raised. "I'm sorry, sir. It's my aunt. She's sick." "Come here," the collector barked. Khufu stepped forward carefully as Willow crouched frozen. There were some words exchanged, but Khufu could never recall them. Collectors did not permit explanations or negotiations. They dealt only in force. They pummeled him, each blow a dull thud against his ribs, his back, his skull. Then, as he blood mixed with the dirt beneath him, they gathered the food and medicine and marched away. But Willow, hidden amongst the stalks, was safe. "She's a feisty one," a collector crackled. Khufu stared back at him as a light rain began tapping on their helmets. Willow, cornered, lashed out. Her small fist connected with a collector's arm, a surprising show of strength. The other collectors swarmed her. One grabbed her arms from behind as another lifted his weapon, ready to strike her. But Willow reared back like a bucking horse and kicked hard, her foot cracking his visor. He dropped his rifle and staggered back. "Enough," a deep voice sounded. Commander Hu approached, the red cape of his rank swimming behind him. "What's going on here?" "The girl is resistant," a collector reported. Hu studied her for a moment. Another cry of thunder roared out as the rain fell harder. Hu's cape billowed as he turned on his heel. "Execute her," Hu said, his voice flat. He looked at Khufu. "You do it." Khufu's heart hammered against his ribs. Feeling his hands tremble, he quickly stood straight and nodded. He walked toward Willow, each step heavy. He saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate plea, felt the mud squelch beneath his boots. "It's you," she whimpered, her voice soft and raspy. Khufu squared himself toward her and watched her eyes fill with tears. "Khufu," she said, Without moving his head, he glanced left and right. She had used his name, a name unknown to any of the others. "Do it quickly," Commander Hu said. He took a deep breath, then another. There were 10 of them in total. Of the villagers, there were at least 50, maybe more. They were weak, but their strength together could be formidable. If he turned his gun on his commander, then perhaps the other villagers would seize the opportunity. He looked at the villagers. He saw Old Man Tiber, his face a mask of grief. He saw the fear in the children's eyes. He saw the collectors, their faces blank, black pools of nothingness shining in the rain. He thought of his new home in the gleaming city in the distance, built on the backs of people like this, his people. He thought of the comfortable life he had, the life he'd purchased with his silence, his willingness to join his oppressors. One more deep breath. He raises his rifle and squeezes the trigger. The shot rings out, and the rain freezes. Hu staggers back, his hand clutching his chest. He takes a few clumsy steps, and then collapses. The wind whistles through the village and sizzles in the gripping silence. Then chaos erupts. Collectors turn, weapons raised. Khufu looks to Willow. "Run," he says. He then aims and shoots at the closest collector, then another, and another. All 3 of them fall, but he feels a sharp bite in his shoulder, and his arm goes limp. He dives toward a vegetable stand and takes cover. Cabbages explode around him, and voices shout, mixing together like dense fog. Khufu lifts his rifle atop a nearby barrel and aims, his other arm still hanging lifelessly at his side. To his delight, at least 20 villagers, including Willow, have overtaken the remaining collectors. He stands and looks around. 4 are dead, the rest disarmed. They have done it. Willow turns, and their eyes lock. The sun finally crawls out and reaches down as if to embrace them. "Khufu," she calls, a light of hope in her eyes. She begins to run toward him, her arms outstretched. He reaches for her. "Do it quickly," I said. It was Commander Hu. Khufu's eyes went wide. He shook the driving rain from his visor. "Yes, sir." "Khufu, please," Willow screamed, her face flooded with tears. He raised a hand to his lips. "Shh," he said, trying to calm her. But the promise felt like ash in his mouth. He opened his eyes and squeezed the trigger. The awful sound rings out and echoes like laughter amidst the booming thunder. Willow's body slumped to the ground. A hand clasped Khufu's shoulders. "Well done," Commander Hu said. "Now load up, Pebble." Rain pattered against glass. Burnt beans overtook the scent of fresh bread. Voices overlapped, as stories were shared and gossip was spilled. The game played on the TV. We were winning. The buzz in the air was almost intoxicating. Even the rain couldn't dull it. Gray stared at the brown liquid. Steam rose, collecting into beads of sweat as his face hovered over the cream-colored mug. Blonde curls, curtained, flushed skin, and bleeding lips as his teeth pulled at the delicate skin. He was in his own air. The buzz flowed around him. His ears were stuffed with the nectar of the past. It seeped out, dripped down his arm, burned through his skin, revealing scars that were hidden with years of neglect. Nails cracked as he dug into the wooden table. His mind swirled. The nectar was thick. It was creeping through the crevices of his head, consuming thoughts he pushed down and forcing him to face it. Metal filled his mouth as Gray bit down harder on his lips. Pain filled his face, and the sob got stuck in his throat. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the mug and took a sip of the bitter liquid. It stung at his bruised lips, but the taste was welcome. A deep breath led to long sigh, releasing tension as he slumped over the table. Pebble? He clinched his eyes closed as his mind flooded. The bricks of the dam slammed and slammed against the limit of his conscious as the memories flooded over him. Gray scrambled across the sticky ground. He gripped at the blood-soaked hoodie, pulling the small body into his arms. His fingers left trails as he rubbed at the bruised skin, hoping his touch would wake him up. Pebble, come on. What he thought was a yell was nothing more than a cracked whisper. Shaking hands gripped at curls that were just like his, just a bit brighter in color. He just kept repeating himself, holding the one good thing in his world, rocking him back and forth like he had to do to help him fall asleep just a couple years ago. A few feet away, smoke rose from the fifth cigarette lit today. It found its home between cracked lips. Lips that never once said anything that portrayed an ounce of care. Those lips belonged to a woman of dirty beauty. Beautiful blonde curls that have been passed along for generations framed a pretty pale face that was stressed by a chosen sickness. She stared at the scene, the bodies that were her offspring, at least by the doctor's words. But just 'cause the doctor said it doesn't mean she cares for it. The law forces her hand, forces her to obey her parental expectations, but it can't make her look at them with anything but an icy indifference. That indifference made her not care when they cried, when they needed to be held, when they needed someone to praise them, when they won, and support them when they fell. That is why, when her youngest was beaten with vase after vase until the glass shards impaled him because he whined too much, she didn't move a muscle. One less expense. Tears were dripping into his coffee, little splatters staining his clenched hands. He took one and bit on it, holding inside his screams as what happened just a few hours ago replayed. Stepping inside the decade-old home, the wood creaking with every step. The excitement he felt with Deku swinging in his pocket. Imagining the look on Pebble's face as he held his favorite character in his hands. Then the way his soul dropped into the pit of his stomach. How his vision blurred until the only thing he could see was his little brother laying on the smoke-infested rug. His blood making it an even darker shade of black. The glass fractures, creating a mosaic of different colors that flickered in the light of the dusty swing lamp. Knots formed at the bottom of Gray's stomach. It burned. It hurt. The more he pushed it away, the more it forced itself forward. Their mother sitting there, watching, dusting the ashes off her pants. Their father's snores, traveling from down the hall. He bit into his skin until it split. Luckily, his shirt was black. No one could see the blood that was making it stick to his chest. Just the dirt that's layered on top of it. He couldn't leave his brother laying there. Someone had to bury him. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. Gray turned his head, blood trailing down his chin. "Are you okay, honey?" It was a middle-aged lady. Her hair was thrown into a tight ponytail that made her sharp features pop out even more. He licked his sore lips. Looking down, he had bit into the white meat of his hand. Blood trickled down his skin and dripped onto the table. Puffy eyes, blood-tinted skin and lips, dirt-stained clothes. Gray knew he looked a mess, swallowing his answer. His voice probably wasn't going to work anyway. He grabbed his coffee mug and walked right past her. Curious eyes probed at him as he walked towards the glass doors. Someone behind him was asking him to wait. But he didn't listen, or he couldn't hear. Either way, he walked straight into storm, the rain soaking his body in just a few minutes. Puddles splashed, cars honked, wet grass coated abused shoes. Gray let his feet lead the way. They brought him to the park. It was empty, of course. He climbed onto the playground, crawling his way into the little tunnel, the one place that was still dry. Somehow, he was still holding on to the mug. He took a sip. It tasted like brown water in the tube, surrounded by the rain cascading down. He let himself cascade. Sobs spilled out until his whole body shook. His hands not able to find the right place to stay. He kept trying to stick them in his pockets, but then he remembered Deku wasn't there. It was tight in Pebble's hand. He gripped his hair, his scalp protesting. His mother's nonchalant figure, his father's peaceful rest, Pebble's warm body lying there, still. It lit something in him. everything he was holding inside, all that he kept hidden, to keep a smile on his little brother's face, all he dealt with to protect him, everything he never gained that he gave. His sobs trailed off into a coughing spill. His mind broke. The pain spilled over, the cuts, the bruises, the memories. The mug cracked in his tightening grip, his shaking hands from the cold, or his anger he didn't know. With a crack, the mug spilled into his lap, and a deafening scream spilled from his lips. The force bruising his already sore throat. It filled the tube. The storm swallowed it, taking his pain into its grasp as his vision blurred with red. Clock is a tickin'. Freeze, jabroni. Don't make a move. Carl almost burst out laughing until he turned around and saw the camouflage gear-festooned, rodent-faced man pointing what could only be a large-caliber handgun directly at him. I told you don't make a move. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back, shrilled the man with the gun. Carl, a tall, thin, balding man with blue eyes, was no longer in a laughing mood. In fact, a sense of ice-cold terror was trickling down his spine. He'd never had a gun pointed at him before. Teetering on the edge of panic, Carl asked the armed man, "Just to be clear, do you want me to freeze and remain still, or turn around and place my arms behind my—" "Shut up, jabroni! Just do what you're told, and nobody gets hurt," barked the gunman. But Carl saw a cloud of confusion pass over the man's rat-like face. Immediately, Carl instinctively knew the man had never pointed a gun at anyone before, and that knowledge placed them on a level playing field, at least to a certain extent. "Hey, look, man, I don't have any problems with you," Carl said as calmly as he could. "I'm just here. Look, my wife got me a new tarp for our trailer for Christmas, and I'm just here to strip off the old tarp and throw the new one on. Who are you, anyway?" Carl's trailer was parked next to the Skookumchuck River in a remote rural area of Washington state. Beautiful in the summer, but right now it was December 27th, and freezing rain was dripping from the slate gray sky onto the small collection of aging recreational vehicles parked along the muddy banks of the Skookumchuck. "I got no problems with you either, provided you're not a Fed. Now show me some ID." The armed man was still barking orders, but it was clear that the burst of adrenaline was waning, and his voice had lost its threatening edge. "Quit pointing that gun at me, and let me get my driver's license, okay? What's your name, anyway?" "And what are you doing here?" Carl said, as he showed the man his Oregon driver's license. "You went across state lines, huh? Not a bad idea. Well, shit. I guess we gotta stick together in desperate times anyways, don't we? The name's Victor, but you can call me Vic." "Damn nice to meet you, Carl. Sorry I was less than welcoming, but you know how it is," Vic said, tucking his pistol into his pants and drawing the back of his hand across his nose before offering Carl a manly handshake. "This here's my trailer," Vic said, casting his head toward an RV about 20 feet from Carl's. "Well, technically, it belongs to my Uncle Kevin, but he's too damn old and doesn't truly appreciate the magnitude of the threat." Carl took a deep breath. Suddenly, he felt somewhat restored to his equilibrium. He knew Kevin. Shit. Carl had been parking his trailer in these woods for about 16 years. He was at least casually acquainted with the other campers and fishermen who frequented the site. As Carl internalized the vital information that Vic wasn't just some random lunatic or escaped convict, he said, "Holy hell, Vic. I know old Kev. Known him for years. Wait, the magnitude of... What is this threat you're referring to?" Vic went still, and his hand wandered to his waistband, where the gun was tucked away. He gave Carl a skeptical stare and then silently assessed their surroundings. The gentle roar of the river was a backdrop for the occasional chirp of a bird. But otherwise, all was silent. Vic's eyes flickered up into the evergreens and peered into the underbrush, but nothing moved. There was no breeze, and the rain was just a mist that hung in the air, along with the scent of moss. Carl belatedly realized that Vic had been out in the woods for a while. His jawline was scruffy, and the pores on his nose were black and visible. Dirt was caked under his fingernails, and his hair was stingy and greasy. "What threat?" Vic hissed. "You playing games with me, Carl? Because you wouldn't be out here if you weren't keyed in, and I don't appreciate being toyed with." No. That's not what I meant. Listen, I'm just trying to understand your assessment of the threat, Vic. We need to share intel if we are gonna get a handle on the... Shit, man. You want some beef jerky? Carl asked, as he yanked a packet of Jack Links out of his pocket and tore it open. Vic accepted a hunk of jerky and gestured that Carl would follow him to his trailer. After about a dozen steps, Vic stopped in his tracks and surveilled the tree line for snipers. But soon enough, they were ensconced in the comfy confines of the almond beige wood paneling in old Kev's RV, chewing jerky and discussing strategy. Soundgarden issued softly from the tape deck as Vic chuckled and said, "Leave it to the computer nerds to completely disregard the obvious fact that we are gonna run out of digits. Goddamn educated idiots is what I call hello?" Vic could do a pretty accurate Jerry Seinfeld impression. "Sweet fancy Moses. Yeah, but what'll happen? What's gonna happen when the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve?" Carl asked, and Vic just shook his head and said, "Boom. Digital apocalypse. We run out of digits. Think about it. Our entire lives, ever since the invention of computers, we've been running on 2 digits. Wait, what? Carl said. There are shitloads of digits, like 8 or 9 at least. Let me ask you this, Vic said, leaning forward. What year did you graduate high school? Class of '94, Carl said. And the year you were born? Vic insisted, leaning closer. 75. What's your point? Carl said, confused. My point? My point? Vic said, locking Carl in his beady gaze. My point is that when we go from 99 to 2000, boom, digital apocalypse, brah. Nobody has ever thought of the consequences. There are no guardrails in place, no safety net, Carl. Think about it. Realization dawned on Carl as he said, Vic, how the fuck did you figure all this out? Do you work for the CIA or something? Vic just chuckled and slowly shook his head. Ever heard of dial-up internet jabroni? My parents have it in my dad's office in the basement. Let's just say it's not just for email and porn anymore. I've done my own research. Fuck, Carl muttered, collapsing back into his chair. Do you think my ATM card will stop working? I'm afraid it's much worse than that, amigo, Vic whispered. It's effectively a Mayan calendar scenario. The end is upon us, and we are gonna need to be prepared. The fucking Mayan calendar? Carl, suddenly animated, exclaimed as he threw his truck keys to Vic. All hands on deck, Vic. You are the wheelman. I'll watch your 6. We need to get down to the 7-Eleven before dark, fuel up the rig, and load up on ammunition. 10-4. Carl, Vic said over his shoulder, but he skittered to a stop just before they reached the truck, grabbed Carl by the front of his jacket, and said, We are gonna need a lot more of this jerky, Carl. We need to sequester as many more packs of Jack Links as we can. Do you read me? I read you loud and clear, good buddy. Now let's get to gettin'. Clock is tickin', jabroni. Clock is a tickin'. Thursday night. Rain pattered on the roof of Grandma's house as Christine settled in after Thanksgiving dinner. She sat on the plush carpet and started playing solitaire on the coffee table. Mom was hollering at the football game, but Christine was doing her best to tune that out. Grandma was in the kitchen, finishing the dishes. Dinner itself had been the usual stuff. Turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, green beans. It was a nicer, heartier meal than Christine usually ate. Now she was pleasantly full, enjoying her cards and the relative peace and quiet. Why are the Lions attempting a field goal? Mom roared, jumping up. She bumped the coffee table and fell back onto the couch. The game went to commercial. Oh, Christine sighed heavily, picking up her fallen cards. Sorry, kid, her mother said, rubbing her sore knee. You know how it is. Christine nodded. It was always like this with football and true crime for some reason. She was glad it was only Mom here being noisy instead of the whole family. Grandma stepped into the living room, wiping her hands off on a towel. She hung it on the back of one of the wooden chairs at the little dining table, on the opposite side of the room from Christine and Mom. "I wish you'd let us help you," Mom said. "Dishes would have been done a lot sooner." No, Grandma said. "After being away for so long, I almost missed doing my own dishes. Besides, there weren't that many." "I tried to get the older kids to come," Mom said. The game was back on, so her eyes were on the TV as she spoke. "But they had other plans. In-laws, I guess. And you know how Dad is." With this last remark, she gave Christine a joking slap on the shoulder. Christine was glad her father and siblings weren't there. When they all got together, they talked too loud, and it would get too hot, and they would pick on and embarrass her. No, she much preferred this little get-together. "I keep telling you it's fine," Grandma said. She sat on the opposite end of the couch so that Christine was between them. She smiled at Christine. "It's kind of neat that we have 3 generations here," Christine nodded, smiling. "Touchdown!" Mom yelled and jumped up again, narrowly avoiding the coffee table this time. Thud. "Oh, for the love of..." Grandma cut herself off. "What did you knock over this time? I hope you haven't broken anything." "Shh." Mom held a finger to her lips and whispered, "That wasn't me. I think it came from outside." Grandma leaned back on the couch and put her feet up. "Probably just the rain, then." "Right," Mom said. She seemed unsure, but she sat back down and was quickly reabsorbed in the game. Christine hesitated, card in hand. "Grandma," she asked. Her voice always came out softer than she expected. "Are you sure it's nothing?" "Of course," Grandma said proudly. "After a month of running around Europe, staying in all kinds of places with all kinds of people, these little noises don't frighten me anymore." "Was it scary in Europe?" Christine asked. She had to repeat the question because of Grandma's hearing and Mom's hollering. When she finally got the question, she answered, "Oh, no. I had a few near misses, but that happens anywhere. Actually, I think you should go sometime. You'd like it." Christine smiled and went back to her cards. She had only placed 2 cards down when she heard another noise. Crash. Her head whirled toward the sound. She noticed Mom and Grandma do the same. Mom muted the TV and looked back at them. "You heard that too?" she asked in a hush. Grandma nodded. Mom patted her pockets. "Ugh, must have left my phone in the car," she said. She looked at Grandma. "Where's yours?" "My cell phone?" asked Grandma. "You know I can't keep track of that thing." Mom looked to Christine. Christine slid her phone out of her pocket and held up the black screen. "Why do you think I'm playing solitaire?" Mom dragged her hands down her face. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Grandma said. "It's probably nothing. I'll go take a look." "No," Mom said. "You stay here with Christine while I go take a look. Do you still have my old baseball bat by the door? Grandma rolled her eyes and gestured to it. Mom picked it up and gripped it tight. She tossed on her raincoat and bolted the door. You two stay here. I'll have a look around the back. Be careful, Christine said. Mom laughed and ruffled her hair. I will. She kissed Christine on the top of her head and went through the kitchen and out the back door. It was silent as they waited, listening. The house isn't that big, Christine said, wringing her hands. How long could it take to look around? Grandma wrapped Christine up in her arms. Your mom's just being dramatic, dear, she said. She'll probably go out and search the whole woods before she's satisfied. What if there's something out there, like a bear, or a vampire, or a maniac with an axe? Christine cried into Grandma's shoulder. Grandma shook her head. Christine, where on earth would you get ideas like that? Christine pushed Grandma away and plopped down onto the couch. I know it's ridiculous. I'm just worried about Mom. After a pause, she added, and you know the only thing she loves more than football is true crime. I was practically raised by Keith Morrison. Christine and Grandma looked at each other, confirming to each other that they had both heard it. An unearthly groaning. It sounded close. Christine shot up from the couch. Something's happened to Mom. I just know it. Grandma grabbed her arm. Don't be rash, dear. Christine suddenly wished the rest of her family were here. No wild animal or axe murderer would attack such a large party. She wasn't sure if the same could be said for supernatural creatures, but maybe her sisters or brothers or father would know what to do about them. Christine tugged her arm free from Grandma's grip. I'm going after her. You can come with me if you want. What were we thinking, splitting up like this? That's how they always get you in horror movies. Christine pulled on her raincoat, flipped up the hood, and flung open the door. Lightning cracked. On the porch, a figure was silhouetted against the storm, carrying Mom unconscious in its arms. Grandma cried out and rushed forward. Rain instantly soaked her to the bone. Christine ran out after her to help. Wait, the stranger said. It was a man. Stop! Give me back my daughter! Grandma shouted. She and Christine kept pulling on his arms, trying to free Mom from his clutches. Dorothy! The man cried out. They all paused at the mention of Grandma's name. Finally, the man huffed. Can we go inside so I can explain? Oh, Sean, I'm so embarrassed, Grandma said. They were all back in the living room. Mom was laid out on the couch with a compress on her head. Christine and the man, Sean, were sitting at the dining table. Grandma placed a steaming cup of tea in front of Sean. I didn't recognize you, Grandma continued. Sean chuckled. I don't blame you. Anyone would be nervous in this situation. Excuse me, Christine cut in. But, who are you? And what happened to Mom? Oh, Grandma said. This is Sean, dear. I met him while I was in England. He saved my life." "She's exaggerating," Sean said. "Not so," said Grandma. "He pulled me out of the way just as I was about to be hit by a bus." Sean sipped his tea demurely. "I told him he could come by for a visit any time," Grandma said. "I tried to call, but I never got any answer. I remembered she doesn't use her cell phone, so I decided to surprise her," Sean explained with another little chuckle. "Oh, well, thank you for saving her," Christine said. "And Mom?" "I found her just in front of the porch. She must have slipped off the step and hit her head." Christine sipped at her own tea, feeling silly. She was glad the whole thing was over. Thud, Christine, Grandma, and Sean all looked at each other. They had all heard the noise. Christine looked at Mom. She had rolled off the couch and was groaning as she climbed back up onto it. "Anyone know who won the game?" she asked. "Heartbeat of the home." Why can't I remember? He thought. His mind would only reveal flashes of the afternoon's events. His head was on fire, sweat dripping down his face like an addict on autopilot. Grant Liscombe burst through the front door, avoiding his mother in the kitchen. Like a spider returning to its web, his lanky teenage legs scurried up the wooden stairs of the old farmhouse to his bedroom. His arms flailed with uncontrollable fear as he yanked the dirt-covered shirt over his head, discarded it on the floor, then bounded to the bathroom, slamming the door. "What have I done? What have I done?" he muttered, lathering the perfumed soap through his fingers, frantic to wash the guilt from his newly calloused hands, watching the streaks of dirt dance and swirl down the rusty drain. His mind was confused by broken images of helping to clean the gutters, the ladder falling. Or was it pushed? The thud as Nick's body hit the ground, and the gleam of the metal shovel as Grant dug the body-sized hole. He confronted the reflection in the mirror, the gaunt, bloodshot, black-haired punk he had become. "Oh God, what have you done?" The reflection glared back with an evil grin. It began about a month ago, after his factory worker stepfather, Nick, lost his job. Grant's middle-aged mother, Jane, with little work experience, was initially grateful for the offer to stay at her aunt's derelict house, remotely located in the Haliburton Highlands of Ontario. Soon, she would regret it. They arrived late on an October evening, rain pelting down. The overwhelming stench of mold and decay nauseated Grant as he stepped onto the porch, past two white rattan chairs resembling broken skeleton bones. Like two cracked teeth, the front window panes whistled as Nick opened the door, and a rush of twisted oak leaves fluttered into the foyer, landing at the base of an antique grandfather clock. "Wow, look at that beauty," Grant exclaimed, smitten with the intricate carvings of the mahogany cabinet, the shiny gold filigree face, moon dial and hands, all in pristine condition, a sharp contrast to the rest of the house. "Hey, Mom, didn't Grandpa have a clock like this?" He set down his backpack, rubbed his hands over the smooth, flawless finish, inhaling the rich smell of lacquer and lemon polish, opened the case to wind the weights, then set the hands to the correct time. "Yes, he did," she answered, removing her coat and shaking the rain from her short blonde hair. "But not as old as this one. Remember what Grandpa always said? The tick of a clock is the heartbeat of the home," they repeated in unison, their heartfelt laughter filling the room with his memory. "But seriously, Grant," she said, pointing at the clock, "that thing gives me the creeps." Grant shrugged. Then, as he tapped the pendulum to start the clock, he felt a sudden chill in the air, a quiver in the continuum of space and time. The walls around him seemed to expand and contract, like the lungs of the house had taken a deep breath. "Are you all right, Grant?" His mother's face concerned. "You look pale." "He's fine," said Nick. "Quit coddling him, Jane. He isn't a child anymore." He chuckled and gently kissed her forehead. "I'll finish bringing in the rest of the stuff." Grant sensed something was terribly wrong. Something had taken control of his body. His mind shouted with fear as his consciousness slipped deeper into an abyss, and a different, cunning voice answered, "I'm okay, Mom." After the family had settled in for the night, the clock softly chimed the midnight hour, and its demon contemplated setting its evil plans in motion. Returning to his room, Grant changed into clean clothes and put on some loud, heavy metal music. He suspected his mother was having issues with his new identity. He began rifling through his closet, not sure what he was looking for. Then, at last, he found it, the metal slugger baseball bat. As he held the handle, he confirmed that Mother was next. "Grant," his mother called from the kitchen, aroma of roast beef wafting up the stairs. "Are you guys done outside? Dinner's almost ready." The stairs creaked with warning as he descended each step. Slow and deliberate, bat at the ready. A satanic song blared out of his room, the heavy bass pounding the walls, thump, thump, thump. "Turn it down," she shouted, stirring the gravy pot, steam filling the room from the whistling kettle. But his music grew louder. He continued his mission, unhindered. From deep inside, Grant could feel the raw hatred of the demon inhabiting his body, its cruel intention, but was powerless to intervene. Suddenly, like a beacon of light through the darkness, he heard a familiar voice. "Remember the heartbeat of the home." It was Grandpa. "Grant," the voice said, "kill the heartbeat." Jane Liscombe turned off the stove and stormed out of the kitchen, down the hall, stopping at the grandfather clock at the base of the stairwell. I said, "Turn it." Stopping mid-sentence, she screamed and jumped back, just as the bat came crashing down, barely missing its target. Grant gripped tighter, then swung again, this time hitting a home run as the bat smashed the glass of the grandfather clock, dislodging the pendulum and sending it flying across the room. The chimes clanged noisily in pain as he swung again and again until the battered clock showed no signs of life. Grant's grandfather's undying love had helped him overcome the demon within him and return to H.'s former self. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, reaching out to hold her, just as Nick came limping through the front door, rubbing his head. "Nick, you're alive!" Grant shouted in surprise and relief, running to hug him. "Nick, are you all right? What happened?" Jane asked, still badly shaken. "I thought he was holding the ladder," he said angrily. "Must have fallen and knocked myself out." He looked around in disbelief at the shards of glass and pieces of wood scattered on the floor. "What the hell happened here? I'll explain in the car. We've got to leave. Now," Grant exclaimed as he helped Nick and his mother out of the house. They drove to the nearest motel, never to return. 2 years later, a young couple turned the key in the tarnished brass lock of their newly rented farmhouse in the Halliburton Hills, and as the war sunlight shone into the foyer, a spectacular sight was revealed. A beautiful mahogany grandfather clock. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.